Just think about it. 50 years ago, 4 out of 5 Chinese worked in the fields, and 96% of Chinese live below the poverty line. And today, China produces almost a third of all goods on the planet, starts trade wars, and participates in the space race with Russia and the United States. And all this under the rule of the Communist Party and the absence of broad democracy. How has China managed to overtake those who, it seemed, were simply impossible to catch up with in the last 30 years? Let's dive into the unique story of how the oldest of the living empires is winning back its dominion. Until the mid-20th century, 85% of the entire population of the Celestial Empire lived in villages and worked on the land. But in England, this situation was only until the mid-19th century. Then the Industrial Revolution happened, and people began to move to cities and work in factories. Thanks to the achievements of progress, Britain not only captured colonies, but also needed new markets for its manufactures. And the Chinese market was perfect for this. For example, if in the middle of the 18th century about 2 million people entered China, and not about 20 foreign ships a year, then by the middle of the 19th century there were already more than 300, including because by this time the British had tasted tea, which became one of the main export goods of Europe. And it is clear that Great Britain simply felt cramped in China. The Crown wanted to maintain a positive trade balance, that is, to sell more goods to the world than it bought. Firstly, in this way, it supported its producers and encouraged the consumption of domestic goods within the country. And secondly, the authorities wanted to get a constant influx of silver and gold into the treasury. Therefore, in 1793, the English ambassador arrived to the Emperor of China with a letter from the King of Great Britain. In it, the king proposed that China conclude a trade agreement on the opening of new ports and establish favorable trade conditions in them. But to this, the Emperor of China gently explained that the Celestial Empire was not going to change anything for the sake of strangers. And anyway, who are you to tell the Emperor of the Sun what to do? In short, the Emperor gently sent the British crown to hell. But this is understandable, at least because China also followed the economic policy of mercantilism, when gold and silver should remain within the country and not go to buy foreign goods. Of course, Britain was not satisfied with this answer, and it began to look for a product that it could hook China on, and this product was opium. No, of course, it was used in China before, well, for example, as a painkiller. But when the Europeans discovered America, they became acquainted with tobacco. And later they brought tobacco to China, where the local population very quickly got a taste for smoking. By the way, today China is the largest tobacco producer on the planet, and almost half of the entire male population of the country smokes there. Well, they smoke and smoke. But what does some opium have to do with it? The thing is that people very quickly figured out how to mix opium with tobacco and smoke such a narcotic mixture. Morphine, which is contained in opium, causes incredible addiction. And then it is very difficult to stop smoking this mixture. But here is where a product was found that could hook China. In the British Indian colonies, the English planted huge opium poppy plantations, and this crop was exported to China. Realizing that Chinese silver was thus going to the British treasury, and the population was simply degrading, in 1800, the Emperor of China banned the import of opium into the country. However, no bans or punishments helped. Thanks to smuggling, over the next 40 years, opium supplies increased tenfold, 9 times. And at one point, the patience of the Chinese authorities simply snapped, and they chose a radical solution. In 1839, Chinese officials demanded that the British give them opium, which they stored in warehouses in the coastal city of Guangzhou. But the British, of course, refused, and they were declared prisoners. At that moment, they realized that all the jokes were over, and they gave out hundreds of tons of contraband opium, which the Chinese authorities confiscated and burned. The leader of this operation, Ling Zexu, sent a letter personally to Queen Victoria in which he wrote, "By what right do you use poisonous drugs to harm the Chinese people? Let us ask, where is your conscience?" But this letter was never read by the Queen. But Britain found a pretext to invade China. In the same year that Ling Zexu burned the British opium, a British navy appeared off the coast of China, and the Opium War began. The gap in military technology was such that 4,000 British managed to defeat a 90,000-strong Chinese army, and the Celestial Empire was forced to sign the humiliating Treaty of Nanking. According to it, China not only paid a contribution for the burned opium in the amount of 8 million kilograms of silver, but also gave the British perpetual possession of Hong Kong and let them into not only Guangzhou, but also into 5 other ports. And of course, there was a British administration in each of them. Of course, no one allowed the sale of opium, but now it became at least 6 times easier to smuggle it. And when in 1856 the Chinese detained another a British ship for piracy and smuggling opium, the British squadron began to bomb Guangzhou. And so began the Second Opium War, which China also lost and was already forced to legalize the import of opium. Just think that half of the British East India Company's export to China depended on the sale of opium. But the worst thing is that since growing opium was more profitable than anything else, more and more arable land inside China was allocated for growing opium poppies. And by the beginning of the 20th century, every 4th adult man in the country smoked opium. No, China did not become a colony like India, but the Chinese vision of the world, where the Celestial Empire is the center of the universe, simply shattered into pieces. The backward barbarians turned out to be stronger, more cunning, and more powerful. But imagine that once in China, you were the strongest empire on the planet, to which people from all over the world came to bow. And now part of your territories is actually occupied by strangers who do there whatever they want. This, without exaggeration, national tragedy in China will later be called a century of humiliation. Of course, the image of the emperor in the eyes of the people was undermined, and China began to transform from a single state into a country standing on the brink of a civil war for power, which in theory was supposed to make China great again.